All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the eighth episode of Focus On. I'm Retro, a contributor with the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit, and as usual, I'm joined by Juan, co-hosting today's session, where we're joined by Monet Supply. Today, we're going to be discussing possible staking and tokenomic revisions as proposed by Monet. The initiative is being branded as Staker Maker, and we will discuss changes to the token itself. I'm sorry, changes to the surplus auction, as well as possible changes to the governance system. There'll be a Q&A at the end, so please feel free to submit any questions to chat, and we'll address them at the end. And from there, we'll hand it over to Mane. Floor is yours.
All right. Yeah, thanks first of all for everyone for coming today to discuss. I guess I can just kind of give like a quick run through of how it works. I'm sure a lot of people have read the post, but and then we can hop into any like questions or discussion points. So yeah, the primary change versus our current governance system is that um, under this proposal, when you put your tokens into governance, um, they're not like fully liquid as they are now. Um, they would be locked up, so you wouldn't be able to transfer them when they're staked in governance. And then if you wanted to get your liquid MKR tokens back, you would need to wait through an unbonding period. Um, it's roughly kind of modeled on Cosmos governance, where in order to stake, you have to be willing to kind of give up that liquidity for typically it's like 2 to 3 weeks. Um, and that brings a couple benefits. I think most importantly, it helps improve governance security, where in our current state, somebody can, you know, borrow or buy up Maker, go put it into governance immediately, like, propose and pass an executive vote and then withdraw and then just market dump their MKR. Um, so it becomes kind of impossible for us to deter malicious stuff or negative behavior because the attacker knows that they could recoup, some or maybe all of their funds just by immediately pulling it and then commingling it with, other people's funds in Uniswap or in Aave or what have you, where we wouldn't be able to fork the token and kind of take their stake out of play. So that's the main benefit here is that you'd be locked up for 2-3 weeks. So somebody could still try and pass a malicious proposal, but they wouldn't be able to recoup the funds. It's kind of similar to how our emergency shutdown works now, where they can't just like pull those funds back out and then sell them back to the market. So that should give us a much greater sense of like deterrence against governance attacks. Um, the second element of change here is that um, sort of as an incentive for people to participate in governance and be willing to give up their liquidity, have to wait a couple weeks if they wanted to sell their tokens. Um, the idea would be that we'd take a portion of any of the MKR that we're buying back from surplus auctions, which is, whenever we're profitable and we have already filled up the surplus buffer as much as we want, we're buying back MKR from the market. And presently we're burning it all, which reduces circulating supply. Um, but in a way, it's kind of basically like paying out that cash flow to all MKR holders equally, whether their wallet's dead or they're holding it on Binance or they're holding it in Aave or they're in governance or anywhere else that they could be holding these tokens. So the concept here is that we would kind of take a specific percentage of whatever that buyback is, maybe like 20%, 30%, what have you. And instead of burning it, we would deposit it into that MKR staking contract. And ideally, this would work somewhat kind of like xSUSHI, where basically we add more tokens. So whenever people who are staking want to withdraw, they might have put in 10 MKR, but then after a year, due to all those buybacks that are partially being granted to stakers, um, they might have like 11 to withdraw or something like that. So it wouldn't require any action for people reinvesting. basically just whenever the protocol is profitable, they would be sharing a little bit of that yield, and it would be concentrated to people who are participating in governance or staking, more precisely, rather than being, with the buy and burn, it's being shared equally among everyone. So this kind of focuses the incentives on the people who are likely to be providing the most value as token holders to governance. They're staked, so they're not selling. They're sort of backstopping governance security. They may or may not be participating, but probably would be because um, we make delegation pretty easy at MakerDAO. Um, so that's the second element. Um, and then there's a series of other kind of smaller changes. That I kind of like tied in here because I think if we're going to be doing like a big governance sort of shakeup, we might as well make all of the changes that we want in a single migration rather than just kind of piecemealing it. So another feature that I think would be a really nice add is, again, kind of borrowed from Cosmos, a concept called conditional delegation, where when you are participating in Cosmos governance, for instance, um, by default, whoever you're delegating to as a validator, they vote for you. Um, but you also have the option of voting yourself. So let's say my validator votes yes on something, but I disagree and I want to vote no. I can go ahead, put in a vote, and then whatever, my share of tokens that we're delegating to that validator, that's going to be counted as a no rather than just following the delegates, or the validator's vote choice. Um, that wouldn't really work with executive proposals because once you pass the proposal and you lift the hat, like it's already kind of, um, there's not really any like latency where we'd be able to like have delegates overrule their or delegators overrule their delegates. So this would only really apply to poll votes, and then if you disagree with the vote that your delegate makes on an executive proposal, you would still need to switch your delegation, and or potentially you'd have to like vote for another executive to overrule it. um, but I think that this hopefully will make people more comfortable in delegating. They still have a voice, and if they're disagreeing with somebody's poll vote that they've delegated to, they can still overrule it. So I'm hoping that we'd see more participation. um, and then secondly, it also keeps voters kind of engaged because they still, rather than currently where they, um, once you delegate, you don't have anything to do in governance. You still have an option to be having an impact on polls. So I think it could be a positive, um, from a couple aspects that end. Um, and then the kind of the last major change that I was proposing was basically an extra like little feature on the staking and unbonding mechanism, um, where governance would have an ability, like as part of making executive proposals, one of those powers to permanently lock the unstaking mechanism. So this would be useful as an example if, let's say, the tariff people come in and they try and stage a governance attack on Maker. um, we could permanently lock the withdraws, and then you know, basically we wouldn't have any risk of them unbonding their tokens and dumping it to the market and commingling it with other funds. Um, and then in the future, we could set up like a migration essentially for MKR where anybody who was, permanently locked in governance, excluding the attackers, could claim from like an airdrop contract. Anybody who was not in governance at the time, in Uniswap or on Coinbase or what have you, they could claim from a migration contract. And this makes it basically a lot more credible of deterrence, knowing that we can cleanly remove the stake of attackers in governance without, nuking AMM pools or lending pools. If we did like a snapshot style migration where we just say, okay, every address that has a token at this block gets the new maker token. Um, and then of course, the lending pools and the AMM pools would get wrecked, because all of their tokens are now worthless. So yeah, I think that's kind of the gist of it. And the principles are basically like hopefully greater governance security and better deterrence against attacks. Um, Concentrating some of the benefits, financial benefits of the MKR system, back to the people who are most likely to be providing value to governance. So that's like concentrating the returns to stakers, um, and then doing all this in a way that doesn't create returns to scale, um, which basically is like we don't want people who own 10,000 MKR to be um, sort of like having a higher rate of return than people who are having just 10 MKR. We'd want to have that be as equal as possible, so that we're not incentivizing centralization. Um, so yeah, that's probably spieled for maybe too long, but I guess if anybody has questions or points they want to discuss on that, all ears.
Sorry, I was unmuting myself. Yes, thanks for that, Mone. So just reminder for anyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the Q&A, or I can also bring you on stage if it's a complicated counter argument. So I have a couple questions that I stole from the forum post. One of them, I think it was from Joey Santoro, and he asked, what's the benefit of making the tokens non-transferable? What's the idea with that?
Yeah, the concept there is that if the like staked maker tokens were transferable, um, they would be integrated across various like DeFi protocols. Like, okay, you'd have a Uniswap pool, you'd have a Curve pool, maybe lending protocols would use it as collateral, um, which on first look seems good because okay, you're having more utility for your maker. People can even earn higher returns or what have you. So it's like you're allowing third parties to kind of subsidize your token with more utility. Um, I think it's probably a net negative though, because you lose that deterrence aspect where um, if your token is really immovable and locked, there's no way that you can, sell it really quickly after you've done a malicious vote. You can't, put it into Aave and then borrow a bunch of tokens out of it. Um, so it makes it impossible for people to, get out without waiting through that unbonding period. If it is transferable, then basically they can commingle their funds with DeFi protocols, and then we wouldn't any longer be able to like actually burn them. So yeah, I think it's could go either way, but in my view, I think the like deterrence aspects and security aspects are they'd be compromised if you let it be transferable.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for that. Peyton Rose, the facilitator for GovAlpha, asks, how do we weigh the costs, namely the developer labor, so anything that has to do with the protocol engineering team, with the benefits to this design? Along those lines, what are some metrics or things that we can expect to see that would indicate that this model is working towards better governance?
That's
Tough one.
that's tough. I mean, like, I think there's been a fair amount of comments in the forum thread as well, saying like, okay, maybe this is a good idea, but is it a priority? Um, and I'm pretty receptive to that. Like, I think improving the core business is, should take precedent. So you wonder how much development work it would take. I think in some respects, the mechanism doesn't seem like super duper complicated, but you do have to build everything safely and it has to be audited and this and that. So um, yeah, I guess I'm receptive to it getting kind of backburnered. Also good because it gives people more time to kind of digest a big change like this before just rushing into it. And maybe seeing if in the interim time period, like if any other tokenomics mechanisms come out that we think are also really good and worth considering. As far as success metrics, I mean, it's kind of amorphous, but I think ideally we'd have a higher share of MKR in governance. I think right now we've got like 200,000 or less, and I think it would be great if we could get 50% staked. That would be awesome, and that would be, um, a lot of those people would probably be sort of like idle voters. It's not like we're suddenly gonna, get people to get off their butt and like, care about governance just because we have a staking module, um, but I think it would still kind of on net, it would still improve security of governance. Um, so that would be a mechanism to look at. I think, um, I hate to say it, but like price is probably like a success metric somewhat as well. Like,
Yes.
people are flogging Maker because it's just boring, and it basically is just like holding a stock. So yeah, I think supply restriction type stuff, it could have a positive impact. Who knows? But that could be another sort of success metric, even though it's tough to say like, okay, is it our business improving that's driving that, or is it tokenomics? In reality, it'd probably be mostly the business improving. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I was trying to think on how to quantify this and how to prioritize it versus other initiatives, and it's definitely tough to when it's related to security and governance and the value that you provide to the token holders.
I think maybe one other thing is like if there's like a time frame that we'd be looking at, we might be considering like, okay, I know delegations expire after a period of time and you have to like reset up a delegation contract. So um, as we get closer to that point, which I think is like kind of the end of this year ish, when a lot of these delegation contracts are going to start rolling over, that might be more of like a crunch time of like, okay, do we want to try and like push this through by then, or do we want to like basically have everyone kind of recycle through their delegation contract, re-up it, and then maybe end up kind of like having some lock-in for the next few months because we've already put people through this work to redo their delegation.
Yeah, makes sense. Frank Cruz, one of the delegates, he's asking, have you had time to perform an analysis of the yield percentage staked MKR token owners can generate? If so, how competitive will it be versus other staking protocols? And do you believe having an attractive yield will be key in expanding MKR ownership?
Yeah, I like threw out some just like funny money numbers at the very bottom of that forum post. So yeah, I think the factors in play are, first of all, like how profitable are we? So that's like the inflow of money that we would use for buybacks. How much of that are we putting straight to the reserves, to the the surplus buffer, just to grow our capital base and be more secure? And I think, at least for the time being, it seems like there's I don't know if consensus, but like generally people are trending towards wanting to build up reserves more and buying back less. Um, so yeah, it's all dependent on, do we actually have money for buybacks? But if if you used like a quarter of the buybacks that you're doing for staking, and then only like 50% of people are staked, that would juice the return by like 30 to 50%. Versus the existing return. So if you were, getting like 2% yield uh, from MKR buybacks as a holder, as a staker, you might be able to get like a little bit higher, like 2.5%, 3%. I think it wouldn't, at least in my mind, I don't think that the yields should be that high. You know, I think, the difference of like 2% buyback yield as just like a general holder versus like 2%, 2.5% of like the buyback and staking yield. Um, Even like a really small change would still be pretty significant for people who are like in it for the long term.
Yeah, and related to that, maybe you can comment a bit on there were some comments in the forum that were arguing, well, a bit for or against making MKR inflationary. I don't know if you can comment on that. I don't think it will have an impact, or at least a direct impact, but maybe I missed something.
Yeah. In my little spec drawings, I had kind of put in okay, well, we could just have governance mint MKR, and then kind of feed it into the staking rewards program, um, either to juice returns a little bit when we already are doing buybacks, or to kind of keep at least some level of staking yield when we're not doing buybacks, and all else equal would go down to zero at that point. Um, I don't know, it seems kind of controversial because um, Maker's existing meme is, and I say meme, but it's the value accrual narrative, whatever, is that we're burning all the tokens, and eventually, our token supply will go down so much that the value is just going to be, you know, you know, a lot more. Like if we have only 100,000 tokens rather than 900,000, basic logic says price should be about 9x. So it challenges that sort of value accrual meme, and I think that um, we'd have to kind of build out another value accrual meme that can take its place. I think profitability, honestly, is really the name of the game, and that's why you'd own any sort of enterprise. So um, yeah, from a personal perspective, I don't think that minting MKR to feed to stakers is really problematic, because at least if you are participating in staking, it's not diluting you at all. It's not like us selling, dumping these tokens on the market or giving it to LPs or what have you. It's non-dilutive, at least if you're kind of in that most engaged state of being somebody who stakes in governance. So your share of ownership would either stay the same or go up. So I think that's an important kind of caveat where, yes, it's inflationary, but it's not dilutive. So as somebody who's in it for the long term, this is still better for you.
Yeah, makes sense. Some worry, I think it was raised by Hexanaut in the forum, and maybe the protocol engineering team is thinking about this. It's the ESM, right? So the emergency shutdown module. So this new system could potentially mean that we are less reactive, or that we have less agility or speed when reacting to any type of emergency. Can you maybe comment a bit on that?
Yeah, I think, well, personally, I'm a big supporter of keeping emergency shutdown as a mechanism in the protocol. It seems like the likelihood of us needing it for a technical issue or something like that is going down over time. The system has survived several years and not had any blowups or such. So I think we are getting kind of more and more confident we don't need it from a tech perspective, but um, I think it's still very valuable from the sort of governance and game theory perspective, where you know you can't, even if you get 51% of the MKR, you can't just do what you want. Um, you always need to build consensus and kind of, yeah. So I think that it's something we shouldn't abandon. Um, I think the solution is probably just some sort of mechanism where you don't need to unstake your tokens and wait through that, several week period, which would obviously kill the mechanism. And you can just do it directly from stake tokens to emergency shutdown and do it like that. So um, exactly how that would be set up, um, tough to say, but I think we should, basically try and maintain the mechanism in principle, kind of how it is now, where um, you could either immediately stake into staked Maker and then emergency shutdown, or if you're already staked, you can just go directly from, your voting contract or your delegate's voting contract, and you can just pull it out and then put it into shutdown. I know I think shutdown is another thing where some people are saying that it's less and less necessary. My biased opinion is that I think we should keep it, and it should continue to kind of work as it does.
Yeah, makes sense. I don't know if you've seen, I think Porter from A16Z posted another version of new tokenomics for MKR. I don't know if you had the time to see those, and if so, do you have any comment on that? Or
I like kind of scanned it, but I haven't like really gotten deep into it yet. So I should probably withhold comments or
good.
like minimize comments, but I guess I don't think that like forcing people who don't want to own Maker to like post it as collateral for stuff is probably going to work. On the face of it, I'm just skeptical. Like, if people really are not interested in owning MKR, they're either going to have like weird mechanisms of like borrowing it from somebody, or they're just going to basically give us like a much worse deal on whatever other sort of contracts or sort of like business that we're conducting with them, because basically they need us to give them a better deal to underwrite them holding that MKR risk that they don't want. So I think like that sort of stuff feels like it's forcing utility into a token when it isn't necessarily a fit. But yeah, I need to read it more and kind of like digest how that all would work.
Yeah, we're trying to get him in a call, so hopefully next week or so we can go more in depth on his proposal. Regarding yours, do you have any type of next steps or any type of timeline regarding next steps, or were you just posting it to see the feedback and improve on that? What's the plan?
Yeah, I think mostly just see the feedback. So I don't have like a timeline that I'm like looking to push this for. I'd say if anything, I'll just try and keep building consensus, figure out if there's like certain elements of it that could be changed a little bit, and then get a lot more support for it. So like incorporate feedback. And then, if there's a timeline, it would probably just be like, if we're going to do it in the next year, it'd probably want to be, by the end of this year, so we can align it with when everyone's delegates contracts are turning over already. So no quick timeline. I think it's a big change. People should have time to like think it over, and other competing proposals, be brought forward, and all of that.
Makes sense. All right, I don't see any more questions from the audience. So what's the best way of reaching out and engaging with you?
Not good at DMs. I was gonna say I'm trying to be better at Discord, so work in progress, but Discord, and then the Maker Forum DMs, I'm trying to be better at those too. So I'd say try that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you didn't have time to review the threads, I think it's quite interesting. I really like the graphics. I thought you were going to show them during this presentation, so I was a bit disappointed. But we'll try to add them somehow. And if anyone has any comments about this, please go to the forums, check the proposal, and if you have any type of feedback, post it there. Monet, as always, it was very nice having you, and we'll see you around.
Yep, thanks.
Have a nice one. Bye, everyone.